Learning to become, learning to learn, learning to thrive, learning to flourish, learning to care.
Humanity is today creating problems faster than it can solve them. So we need to change education because problems and the way we can avoid them or create solutions for them all go through education. So learning has to change, and it has to change by going from a culture of competition within disciplinary boxes where learners learn what they are told to learn to a mode where they are invited to collaborate together to face today's problems and co-construct tomorrow. So learning has always happened on this planet since life has emerged on it, but we are learning ever better and we need to learn ever better. We have been learning within communities, we have been learning from one another, and the best way to increase our learning ability is to be reflective about our abilities to learn so that we can learn how to learn. We have to do this as individuals, we have to do this as community, we have to do this as society, building learning societies, and I think we have to do this at the planetary level today, and therefore we have to build a learning planet. A planet where anywhere you are, you can learn from others and you can contribute to the collective learning, and you can learn to solve your own challenges, you can learn to solve your community challenges, you can learn to solve our global challenges. And there is ever more examples of this learning happening across the globe. This is true everywhere. In every country there are pioneers that are starting to build learning communities and are contributing to create a network, certainly a local network, but most of them are now part of a global network. And that's what we have to facilitate within this learning planet. We can start reflecting collectively on what it is that we've been learning this year during the COVID crisis, and what it is that we want to learn next year, and how can we learn from one another so that we can learn faster together to face our personal, local and global challenges so that we can all learn to take care of oneself, others and the planet. Celebrating is one of the nice things we love to do as human beings. We celebrate so many things, and I think that among the most important things that we are good at, there is learning. And I think we have to celebrate learning. And the fact that there is a recent International Day of Education, I think should be celebrated. And I think it should certainly include official events, but I think it should include everyone celebrating wherever they are. What they have learned that is the most relevant for themselves and that they want to share with others. They can celebrate, who helped them to learn. They can celebrate what they've learned. They can celebrate how they've learned. And I think it's very important because it can facilitate our own reflexivity and it can celebrate our own abilities to collectively do things that we could not do alone. It can help create the joy of learning. That's why celebrations are good. But it can also help us to start reflecting on what it is that we want to learn next. And once you start doing this, you may realize that your neighbor has learned last year what you want to learn yourself. And so you can start building a network of learners at all scales, certainly at the community level, but also at the national and international level. And I think that today we are able to build digital tools that can empower us to learn from each other the same way scientists have learned from each other since many centuries. For instance, Newton was saying that if he could see far, it was because he was standing on the shoulders of giants. And I think all of us can see further by climbing on each other's shoulders, and this way we can maybe solve our collective issues and collective challenges. I think youth should be playing a central role in this learning planet. Youth has many challenges. Every generation of youth has had many challenges. They have to learn to become themselves. They have to learn to be empowered. They have to learn to build the world of tomorrow. That has been true of all generations. But this very generation is facing unprecedented challenges. The climate challenge, for instance. And in fact, international organizations like the WHO and the UNICEF have written with the Lancet Commission a report which says that the youth of today is probably going to have a life expectancy that is shorter than the previous generations. Why is this? This is because they have the threat of the climate change. They have already very polluted air in many of the towns where they live. They have an obesity epidemics. They have a pandemics, not only of COVID, which is not directly affecting them very much, but indirectly affecting them a lot, in the sense that they are psychologically isolated, which is one of the worst things that can happen to a young mind that needs connections to discover himself or herself. And so this is a major issue. But they have also other issues that are addictions issues. There's the addictions of the 20th century that are already very present and have affected many of the previous generations and still do. But there is new 21st century addiction. And these addictions to digital tools, to digital social media, to digital games, for instance. I think the youth of today has to learn to face all this issue and have to learn to do things together that they cannot do alone. And the beauty of this generation is that they have access to technologies that can truly empower them, that can truly connect them, so that wherever they are, they can start working together to do together things that they cannot do alone. They can start learning from the previous generations, they can start asking for new rights, and even the WHO and UNICEF Lancet report I was mentioning is inviting the youth to ask for new rights. And I think, in today's age, we have to reinvent the Sustainable Developmental Goals in the light of the youth and the next generations, and we have to reinvent the right of the youth in the light of the Sustainable Developmental Goals. Among the next steps for the Learning Planet initiatives, the dream vision for me is to be able to have everyone, whenever you're facing a personal challenge or a community challenge or a global challenge, you should be able to have instant access to the best learning material, to the best learning communities, to the best mentors, to the best peers, so that you can start belonging to a common project. And in a way, what we need to build is what I like to call sort of a GPS of learning, or even a GPS of dreams, where all dreamers, when they dream alone, they cannot do much. But if they start dreaming collectively, as John Lennon and Yoko Ono were saying, they can learn from each other, they can start making their dream come true by working together on those dreams. And I think that the Learning Planet initiatives can progressively build the various components for this. Every community, every learner can contribute to the learning collective, and we experts in digital tools can help build various dimensions of this. Artificial intelligence, for instance, can be used to match people that have the same dreams or people that have the same learning paths, and can start making recommendations so that when you want to learn something new, what is the fastest way to go from what you already know to what you would want to know in order to solve your personal or your community challenges. I think we can start building the digital infrastructure and the human communities that can feed that infrastructure, so that all of us can start contributing to collective intelligence and benefit from collective intelligence.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to contribute to this second edition of the Learning Planet Festival on the occasion of the International Day of Education 2021. Lifelong learning is key for achieving sustainable development. It is integral to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as reflected in SDG 4 on education. The UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, UL, located in Hamburg in Germany, is UNESCO's dedicated entity for promoting lifelong learning. We work towards making learning opportunities available to all people around the globe through creating a culture of lifelong learning. While lifelong learning is not a new concept, there is still a long way to go in order to transform lifelong learning into reality for the entire planet. Many countries continue to struggle to meet the basic educational needs of their citizens, and millions of people, some of them in the richest economies, remain excluded from learning. While sustained efforts are needed at the national level to fight such inequalities, it is equally necessary that we take action at local level. In particular, cities can help reduce inequalities by incorporating lifelong learning into urban policies and local development projects. The UNESCO Global Network of Learning Cities offers ample evidence of the relevance and impact of lifelong learning policies at local level, including to provide integrated responses to the global COVID-19 pandemic. Recognizing the transformative power of lifelong learning, both at national and local levels, involves a major shift, not only in policies, but a cultural shift. At the core of this movement is the recognition of learning as a human right, a right that should eventually guarantee the continuity of learning throughout life for all. Furthermore, it should also be viewed as a public good, which involves caring for oneself, for others, and for the planet. In a recent UL report called Embracing a Culture of Lifelong Learning, 12 international experts representing various disciplines argue that creating a global culture of lifelong learning will be key to addressing the challenges faced by humanity, the climate crisis, technological and demographic changes, not to mention the challenges posed by the COVID-19 pandemic and the inequalities it has exacerbated. The report calls on the international community to treat education as an asset for individuals and society, and to recognize lifelong learning as a new human right. It also outlines the profound transformations needed in order to achieve lifelong learning for all, and the role of relevant stakeholders, national and local governments, schools and universities, non-formal education providers, employers, and civil society organizations, to name but a few. The report also discusses the role of digital technologies in transforming the ways in which people acquire knowledge and skills. These new digital devices and services have great potential for expanding learning and enabling people to learn anywhere at any time. But they also carry a number of risks regarding inequalities and the recognition of lifelong learning as a public good. Celebrated on the occasion of the International Day of Education, the Learning Planet Festival is a marvelous opportunity to remind ourselves of the centrality of lifelong learning to prepare a better future, and to reflect on how, together, we can mobilize collective intelligence to reduce inequalities, give better opportunities to people, make our societies more inclusive, and protect the planet. I wish the Learning Planet Festival's organizers and participants an event rich in fruitful exchanges and reflections. I am honored to be joining you to celebrate the power of lifelong learning for societies across the world and for our planet. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Urvashi Sani. I'm a co-founder of Catalyst 2030 and a co-chair of the Working Group for Education. I'm here to introduce Catalyst 2030 to tell you who we are, what we do, and why we do it. Also what our main challenges have been and what our obstacles are. What is Catalyst 2030? Catalyst 2030 was launched at Davos in January 2020 and was initiated by leading social entrepreneurs from Ashoka Echoing Green, the Schwab Foundation, the Skoll Foundation, and other global networks of social entrepreneurs. The group is inclusive and rapidly expanding to include governments, funders, bilaterals, multilaterals, and others seeking the achievement of the SDGs. So what is our vision? Together, we envision that we will achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030 through an unprecedented mobilization of social entrepreneurs, partners, and resources. And our mission is catalyzing collaboration across sectors to unleash collective potential for global system change, including consciousness and cultural shifts. And who are we? We are a network of high-performing social entrepreneurs and innovators who have implemented interventions at scale. We are 439 members now from 195 countries and growing. We are innovators, entrepreneurs, supporters, and other champions of systems change, collectively touching more than 800 million lives and maintaining a funding volume of over $1.5 billion. We have a comprehensive coverage of the SDGs and SDG targets. Our members cover 100% of the SDGs and 75% of the SDG targets, giving us the unique opportunity to design and implement holistic systems change collaborations. We have a validated track record and proven methods to drive systems change. More than half of members' organizations have implemented programs at least on the country level, and nearly 30% of the organizations have succeeded in driving the passage of new policies. What have been our, and we are based on the core values that we place people and nature at the center. We believe in a co-creative mindset, in collaborative leadership. We also are humbly audacious. We have audacious goals, but we have the humility to understand that we can't do them alone, and that's why we need to collaborate. And we are guided by a spirit of generosity, which means that we do whatever it takes without expecting anything in return to achieve our vision. So what have been the main challenges that have driven us so far? One is that we know, and there's a lot of research telling us, that if business continues as usual, we simply will not achieve the SDGs for another 96 years. Many global, regional, and local institutions and governments just simply don't have the means to address the complexity of societal problems at scale. Secondly, that there is minimal coordination among the few who have the capability and freedom to influence system actors and build their capacities, such as social entrepreneurs like us and other social innovators. We have the expertise, we have the networks, we have proven models needed to change systems within specific geographies or issues. Yet, we are unable to coordinate with others to catalyze change at scale. And governments are still to take us seriously. So despite several examples of successful collective entrepreneurial action, we are still not able to have the kind of impact that we should be able to do, given the numbers, our numbers, and the scale at which we work. So these are some of the main challenges that Catalyst 2030 was hoping to address. We also believe that the pace of adoption of financial and funding models to advance systems change is not accelerated to match demand. So what has been our achievement? That in 1 year, we are just a year old, our membership has grown from the initial 150 to 493. We have country chapters in India and Brazil, and we have regional chapters in all the main regions, in Europe, in North America, Latin America, in Africa, the MENA region, and in Southeast Asia. So, and our main achievement actually is our network itself. Already in such a short time, we have 50 collaboration across sectors working. And what's our critical obstacle? The critical obstacle really is that there are several, but we do need a seat at important decision-making tables, one. And we need funding to be able to effectively collaborate so that we can have an impact at scale. In terms of my favorite example of collective collaboration in addressing a serious issue, for one, the moment we started, COVID hit, and so we were able to quickly come up with a collective response to COVID across geographies and across sectors. And we are coming up with a New Allies report, which we hope to give government and policymakers to tell them that what social entrepreneurs need in order to be effective to help achieve the SDGs. And what is our most successful and effective collaboration? It is that one, just Catalyst 2030 itself. We are a collaboration of 439 members. We already have working successful 50 collaborations and counting. And we have, out of the 439 members, 185 members are working with education, and we were able to come up and contribute to UNESCO's Future of Education initiative for their 2050 report. So, all in all, Catalyst 2030 has ambitious goals, but once again, we are humble enough to know that we can't do them ourselves. We are delighted to collaborate with the Learning Planet and hope that together we can achieve our vision and our mission.
Hello, and thanks for inviting me to this festival. You couldn't have chosen a more important theme and a more relevant moment for this festival. This is clearly a difficult time for education, but it's also a time of extraordinary both technological and social innovation in education. This is the moment education for sustainable development has prepared us for. Globalization and technology have connected people, countries, continents in ways that vastly increase our individual and collective potential. But the same forces have also made the world more volatile, more complex, more uncertain. The world is seeing a growing disconnect between the infinite growth imperative and the very finite resources of our planet, between the financial economy and the real economy, between the wealthy and the poor, between the concept of our gross domestic product and the well-being of people, between technology and social needs, between governance and the voicelessness of people. I'm not saying that schools are responsible for all of that, but we should also not underestimate the impact of the values, the attitudes, the knowledge and the skills that our schools promote on the social, economic, cultural world around us. Technology and even a virus can disrupt our economic and social structures, but the implications are never predetermined. It's always the nature of our collective responses to those disruptions that determines their outcomes. The interplay between the technological frontier and the social and institutional agents that we mobilize in response. The Sustainable Development Goals provide an answer to this. They are the missing piece of the globalization puzzle, the glue that can counter the centrifugal forces of the age of accelerations. But again, it's going to be educators who hold the key to ensuring that the SDGs become a real contract with citizens. The one thing we all figured out is that schooling in these times is no longer just about teaching students something. It's more about helping them develop a reliable compass and the tools to navigate with confidence through this complex and volatile world. Success in schooling today is about building curiosity and opening minds. It's about compassion, opening hearts. And it's about courage, mobilizing our cognitive, social, emotional resources to take action. And those are also going to be our best weapon against the biggest threats of our times now. Ignorance, the closed mind. Hate, the closed heart. And fear, the enemy of agency. We live in this world in which the kind of things that are easy to teach and easy to test have also become easy to digitize, to automate. We know how to educate second-class robots, people who are good at repeating what we tell them. Well, in the age of artificial intelligence, we need to think a lot harder about what makes us human. Of course, state-of-the-art knowledge is always going to remain important, no question about it. But the world no longer rewards us just for what we know. Now, Google knows everything. But for what we can and do with what we know. Science isn't just about physics and chemistry. It's about our capacity to think like a scientist. History isn't just about remembering dates and names. It's about being able to think like an historian. To understand how the narrative of a society has emerged, how it developed, how it advanced, and sometimes how it unravels when the context changes. And what does it mean for us? What can we do today with that to shape tomorrow's world? Schools are very good at breaking big problems down into smaller bits and pieces and then train students to solve those kinds of pieces. But today the world creates value by synthesizing different fields of knowledge, by making connections between ideas that previously seemed unrelated, by connecting the dots where the next big idea, the next innovation is going to come from. And that always requires to be familiar with and also receptive to knowledge, ideas from other fields. To be able to think across the boundaries of different school subjects. In today's schools, students typically learn individually, and at the end of the school year, we give them a degree for their individual achievements. But the more interdependent the world becomes, the more we need great collaborators, great orchestrators, people who understand how other people think, how other people work, whether as scientists or as artists, and how other people live in different cultures, in different traditions. People who can live with themselves, who can live with others, and who can live with the planet. In the past, schools were technological islands with technology typically conserving existing practice rather than transforming practice. In the future, schools need to be a lot better to use the potential of technologies to liberate learning from past conventions and to connect learners in entirely new and more powerful ways. The past was divided, with teachers and content divided by subjects and students separated often by the expectations we as adults have of their future career prospects. With schools designed to keep students inside and the rest of the world outside. With a lack of engagement with families and often a reluctance of schools to partner with other schools. The future needs to be a lot more integrated, and integrated also with the needs of the planet. None of that is easy. Surely none of this will be done overnight. But it must be done, and it can be done. The task is not to make the impossible possible, but to make the possible attainable. Thank you very much.
Hello everybody, my name is Kirsten Dunlop. I'm the Chief Executive of an organisation called EIT Climate Kick. Our principal focus is on tackling climate change, both decarbonisation of high emissions activities and adaptation and resiliency to climate change effects, and to do that through the power of innovation. Our main focus is on systemic change, on harnessing the power of innovation to learn how to change complex systems, starting with ourselves. We're a network organisation. We work with and through others, with a wide community across Europe, but we also have activities in Southeast Asia, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in South America, and partnerships in the US, in Israel, and in Australia. Our approach is one of combining both developing sources of innovation and new solutions, business models, technologies, mindsets, governance models, policy innovation, and so on, but harnessing them, designing the combination of those innovation actions and deploying them in portfolios that are place-based portfolios that are constructed to really test for multiple solutions, test for possibilities for change through multiple solutions happening simultaneously on the ground and connected to one another through processes of sense-making and meaning-making and active learning. And the objective of our activities is to harness that experiential learning activity directly to decision-making, to policy procurement, planning, and to allocation of capital and investment. One achievement that I am particularly proud of is the fact that we have moved from theory to practice. We have launched, through activities that we've called deep demonstrations, a concerted effort in systems innovation, in the practice of systems transformation, of learning or catalysing change in a systemic way through the power of innovation. We've done that in real places, in cities, in Europe, in regions, and we're working also on agreements around country-level transformations. And what that says to me is that this is long-term. or at least when I say long term, we don't have that much time. So let's say 5-10 years work at least. It is very, very difficult work. It involves crashing into and crashing through a number of barriers formed by our current assumptions, our assumptions about what innovation is, about what learning is, about what's possible, and our tendency to think mechanistically in linear ways and in siloed ways. So it's an achievement from my perspective to have put ourselves into the position of being a vehicle for experimentation and a space of demonstration and exploration of possibility. One of the principal obstacles that we face is the pressure for tangible results in short time frames to prove a concept before it will be funded or before impact expectations are open to it, before we can really get an alignment of interests on the table. The obstacle we're often working with is the obstacle of habit, the habit of expectation of predictable results, of visible outcomes within short time frames, of the expectation that kind of conversion of action into quick wins is a proof of concept and the proof of concept that people want to see, when in fact we are talking about dealing with mindsets, capabilities, and with self-transformation, which is the most difficult thing of all, because it really it runs into the challenge of the extent to which we are aware of the need to transform and the extent to which we are open to the depth of curiosity, risk-taking, and comfort with ambiguity that requires. My favorite example of effective collaboration to address a complex issue, historically, my mind tends to go to something like the Montfleur scenario process and the extraordinarily difficult, complex transformation of South Africa, and the learnings that have come since on where that worked remarkably and where it didn't. Another example is a deep demonstration we call long-termism, whose object is to achieve or catalyze systemic change in the financial services industry and in financial thinking around time, thinking around time more broadly. In other words, to tackle the problem of our world being constructed around a notion of the value of zero, of time to zero. The faster we can get things, the closer the deal, the shorter the second of high value transactions and so on, is an economic value as well as a social value. Instantaneity is a social and economic value. And unfortunately what that drives is it supports and underpins, for example, things like notions of discounting the future in order to privilege the present that are enshrined in our notions of accounting frameworks. It drives, in many instances, consumerism. I think of a thing that I want, I order it instantly, and I get it as instantly as possible. And it really hinders our capability of thinking about long, slow, patient partnership in ways that take their inspiration from the natural world, that are organic and that understand and look for interdependencies and privilege the importance of investing for the future in our present actions as opposed to maximizing outcomes in the present no matter the cost to the future. And that, of course, is one of the root cause issues in terms of the industrial and economic models we have at the moment. And that has been a journey of bringing together extremely different actors to work together, to form views, to bring very, very different views, and to coalesce around a vision of possibility, coalesce around exploring real options for addressing, introducing and experimenting with that kind of structural order of change, and also coming together to solve around the problem of how would one finance that kind of work, and beginning to launch both information platforms, collaboration platforms, and a funding platform. For me, a key thing or a couple of the key things to do to develop more effective problem solving, first and foremost, this is about mindset and capability. And I think one of the key learnings I have over the last actually 25, 30 years of work in this space is that we need to retrain ourselves how to think. We need to teach ourselves to see the world differently, see ourselves differently, and learn to think For example, learn to shift our thinking from scarcity thinking to abundance mindsets, really shift our sense of the properties of physical things, how much more possibilities are there in the materials that we use, in the way in which we think about time, the way in which we think about what work is, and to shift our thinking into a much more integrative space. And for that, for example, bringing art and science back together so that we can begin to understand our decision-making. Well, we know that our decision-making is not rational. How do we act socially, politically, economically on that fact and begin to reintegrate the power of imagination into our rational decision-making, or our post-rationalization of decision-making? So start to expand the resources with which we think individually, which therefore expands the resources with which we think collectively. Thank you very much.
So I would first like to start by thanking you for inviting me to address the Learning Planet Festival and to address all of you. I think that this festival could not be organized at a better time. At a time when we're realizing that in many parts of the world, unfortunately, ignorance and arrogance are creating a Molotov cocktail. A cocktail which is really downgrading the importance of knowledge and the importance of the transfer of deep knowledge and deep understanding of the complexity of the world in which we live in. At the Club of Rome, clearly for the last 50 years, we've been in particular talking about the complexity of the world and the interconnectedness between people, planet, and prosperity, and the need to address this from a systems perspective. What we're realizing in today's complex world is the total deterioration of that systems perspective, the deterioration and the inequity between people, planet, and prosperity. The fact that those are not parts of a whole, but actually completely separate, and getting involved in very deep paradigm shifts and power pandemics as we see them spreading across the globe today. What we've tried at the Club of Rome recently is to see how we can translate some of our knowledge, our deep knowledge and understanding of people, planet, and prosperity into impact, into action through our impact hubs. And we've tried to do this also by engaging in an intergenerational dialogue, because we absolutely know that if we are going to be good ancestors, if we are going to be offering a planet which is for people and other species and does not focus just on anthropocentrism, but actually on the equal value of all species on Earth, then the only way to move forward is to ensure that those three principles are embedded across our educational system, across the way in which we transfer knowledge through communities, and the way in which we transfer knowledge within our own families and between generations. And I think I'm very proud to say that some of our impact hubs have already started to have a real fundamental shift in thinking. Our planetary emergency partnership and the way in which we've looked at the planetary emergency, bringing in the convergence of tipping points between climate change, biodiversity loss, and now obviously the health pandemic, has very much brought together key actors across the globe to see how we can optimize not only our knowledge, but also the way in which we work together and we co-design the planet that we want to see. The key missing link within that discussion, however, that must be part of the way in which we move forward in this decade of action as we start 2021, has to be around how do we systematize the learnings that we have, the science that we have, the indigenous knowledge that we have through different knowledge centers, whether it be through our educational system or whether it be through community centers, whether it be through the way in which we bring together through new governance models, citizens, so that they can actually be part of the way in which we develop and design the future planet and the future humanity that we want to see. The breakdown that we have seen in the United States of the governance system, but in particular of a people who have decided to take control into their own hands through their own individual desire, rather than trying to work through a collective system of change, has been absolutely disastrous. And because it has moved away from a very deep value system of understanding that we are all important as each other, not just human beings, but as species. So as you engage on this very important festival, and as you start to speak to each other, I would urge you to go beyond just a narrative, to go beyond just learning is important, to really understand how we can specifically unpack the different institutions that we have, that are knowledge institutions, the different ways in which we can learn, and how we use this decade of action as a decade of learning and applying, to shift from just knowledge as being intellectual or being within our own brains into knowledge as being embedded in the way in which we look at our hearts and our souls as we engage with each other and as we engage with this complex world around us. Because we know that the only way in which we will survive through the Anthropocene is if we start to truly integrate people, planet, and prosperity into all of our systems thinking, into the way in which we design policy frameworks that we have, as well as we design our future leaders. And I'll close with this very important point. We know through the Club of Rome and our youth summit that we recently had in October, that the youth are feeling increasingly disenfranchised. They feel that they are the voice of the future, and yet they are not given the possibility to truly understand and react within this complex world through the right tools that we are offering them, through our educational systems, through our knowledge exchange, a real unpacking of what does this mean in practice and how can they become real actors and leaders of the future. So I wish you all the best in this incredible endeavor, and very much hope that the Club of Rome can continue to work with many of you to ensure that this truly is a decade of action and translating our knowledge and our understanding of the complexities at hand into tools and solutions so that the future that we have will make us proud for many, many centuries to come. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kim Pullman. When I co-founded Reboot the Future, I had a specific challenge in mind: to help change the mindset of individuals and organizations to behave in ways that are helpful and not hurtful. I have tried to live by a very simple precept known widely as the Golden Rule. We dream that more people will live by our modern version of the Golden Rule: treat others and the planet as you would wish to be treated. This phrase is so deceptively simple, but very powerful. It is an antidote to the greed and arrogance, to the exploitative and abusive systems that have become commonplace and somehow accepted in modern times, despite the pain they cause. There are thousands of references to some version of the Golden Rule in the most important religious and philosophical literature for thousands of years. At Reboot, we think of it as the original operating system, the foundation for civilized society to flourish. Reboot's aim is to bring forward the common positive values that humanity shares: kindness, tolerance, respect, honesty, fairness. These are so helpful. Living these is really what makes us satisfied, safe, and content. We encourage living the Golden Rule through our programs and resources, improving skills in how to collaborate and how to have better conversations. A major aspect of that is learning how to listen. Our Imaginal conversation series are private, intimate discussions. We ask people to listen to each other and to speak from the heart. With our Global Dimension website, we bring the SDGs to life in the classroom. Here, teachers can find lessons on the world's issues and learn what they and students can do about them. During the pandemic, we have been trying to support teachers as they have faced unprecedented challenges with their students and families. Lastly, we are collaborating with Jonathan Porritt and some exciting filmmakers to create a new book and film called Rise Up, in which young people will be asked, how do you want to reboot the future? I was asked recently what I am proud of. I had never thought to publish a book, but I am proud that with my co-collaborator, we published Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation. 25 great people, from Al Gore to Desmond Tutu, wrote articles about their work, solving today's difficult issues, illustrating how their work is done through a desire to live the Golden Rule. The book set the tone for our collaborative method of working and led us to establish the foundation, Reboot the Future. I am proud of Reboot's team, board, and staff, who all seek to model the same behaviors that we promote: listening, inspiring courage that leads to action, and a more helpful way of doing things. We have a vast network of people we reach, such as teachers, students, artists, engineers, business people, investors, food producers, humanitarians. We are all in this together. Imagine a world with a large group of people motivated by a common principle that would start discussions and planning with the same value, that of helping others rather than satisfying one's own ego. Living the Golden Rule leads to collaboration. From the beginning of Reboot the Future, we agreed that we would not compete, but rather collaborate. We are a small team, but everything we do is with partners. The Imaginal Cell concept, which our book is based on, is itself one of collaboration, where different cells come together to precipitate the metamorphosis of life from caterpillar to butterfly. This collaboration is the predecessor to change. We all have a choice if we want to be the caterpillar cell that actually tries to block the new way, or do we want to be the Imaginal cell that helps the new way emerge? For this new way to emerge, there must be partnership, but this is not necessarily easy. If 6 different people come together to work on something, there will be 6 different visions. We suggest to start by taking time at the beginning to listen intentionally to the others, to learn everyone's perspectives without judgment, to understand why everyone does what they do, to find common ground, to clarify differences, and basically to learn deeply that there is not just one truth, that everyone operates in a system where all the parts are connected, and that what one does affects the others. The key thing is to treat others and the planet as you would wish for yourself. To celebrate the relaunch of Global Dimension, we will be running a live event here at the Learning Planet on Monday, 25th January at 6 p.m. Central European Time, with globally renowned environmentalists Johan Rockström and David de Rothschild, who will share their tips and ideas on how you can motivate students on the climate crisis during lockdown. To find out more and to join us, please go to Track 5, the Hub. We hope to see you there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Alison Bellwood and I am the founder of The World's Largest Lesson. Thanks for inviting me to speak to you today. I'm going to talk you through the project itself and our plans for 2021. We were founded in 2015 to build awareness, support and action for the SDGs amongst the world's education community, all teachers and students everywhere. We aim to inspire educators to weave the goals through their teaching so they become part of the language of young people and schools and act as a framework for social action. What we do is create free resources in multiple languages for students and educators, from lesson plans to projects, films, comics and challenges. We aim to provide something for every setting. It's impossible to create truly universal resources, so we make them open source. Sometimes all a teacher needs is an idea to get them started. Other times they want a full and detailed plan or a project, and so we make that possible. We try to make the goals feel relevant, to use the local community and the environment as the setting for learning. We encourage students to get outside and look for evidence of the goals where they live. This helps them feel more connected to the issues and also stimulates them to think of solutions rather than just problems. This experiential learning develops skills like critical thinking and problem solving and builds agency so that all students feel that they can play a part in achieving the goals, even with the most tiny of actions. In one sense, creating learning resources is the easy part of what we do. What isn't so easy is making sure they're used and that they're effective. And that's never truer than with a programme that aims to reach right across the world. As any educator will know, you can't create a universal lesson and expect that it will resonate everywhere. The setting and the student experience to date really dictates what the learning should be, so we encourage all those that access our resources to shape and develop them as they see fit. As I said, they're open source. You can strip them apart. You can use one nugget or you can use all of it, however it suits you. We think of the resources that we create as just the start of our work, and it's only through some incredible partnerships that we've been able to make sure that they are used and that they've been effective. A good example of that is a project that we began in Nigeria in 2019, where we wanted to reach children in schools that don't support global learning or education for sustainability in any meaningful way. And we wanted to encourage students to raise their voices, perhaps for the first time, and become agents of change where they live. The idea was really simple. We wanted to reach as many children as possible in 1 week and make a moment of it, bringing together a network of youth volunteers to do it and to train them to deliver an introductory lesson to students, to engage them in the idea of the SDGs and the idea that they could play a role locally in achieving them. Then we wanted to leave behind a legacy of after-school clubs for the SDGs, where learning would take students deeper into the issues and help them begin to develop solutions. The partnerships that we created to make this project work were fabulous. 2 local NGOs supported by my team brought networks of young people together. UNICEF and UNESCO added weight to the project on the ground. We worked with government encouragement across 2 departments, and we added awareness raising via Facebook and Instagram campaigns. We reached 800,000 children in a week and left behind nearly 300 after-school clubs that are still running. While this is a good example of what is possible, it also highlights the problem. We can't reach everybody, and we can't provide exactly the right learning experience for everyone. The expertise lies on the ground with educators, and what they need is the permission, the training, and the encouragement to do more. The world and the issues that we face right now are so interdependent. COVID-19 has proved that. And there's really an urgent need now for education to change in response to this. Right now, in 2021, what we're doing is focusing with many others on the critical need to make climate and environmental education a formal part of all children's schooling. It should form the bedrock of understanding that everybody needs to be able to respond to climate change locally, to protect our natural world, to build resilience and to help shape productive and green economies. As I'm sure you'll be hearing right throughout this festival, now is the time to really work together across the whole sector to call on governments to step up their commitments to environmental and climate education. From my point of view, it's a right. It's a right as defined in the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and it's a commitment written into the Paris Treaty, yet so few governments have made formal commitments, and even fewer are actually delivering the learning. So, as far as the world's largest lesson is concerned in 2021, what we want to do is to bring together all of the different work and different networks that we engage with into one project. And that is to invite children themselves to campaign for climate education, to give them the experience of turning their own learning into action. We're in the process of making a learning experience, creating it for children that involves exploring why climate and environmental education matters, why they, more than any other group, have the right to ask for it, and why now is the time to do it. We want them to collect up all that learning and turn it into a call to action to decision makers. It could be their head teacher, it could be their school district leader, it could be their state or even their national decision maker, the one who actually decides what they learn where they live. We're producing this for the kinds of children who are younger than those already campaigning, those who may not have done anything like this before. It's the kind of activity that anyone who's teaching global issues, civics, environmental or climate change can fit right into their planning as the culmination of that learning, actually trying to change something. We would love to see as many teachers and children as possible getting involved in this. We'd love to prove to children that they can be agents of change if they act with one voice. Wouldn't it be amazing if we could see multiple countries standing up one after the other at COP26 in November and making their commitments to climate and environmental education becoming formally part of everyone's learning? And then to act upon that commitment with urgency and deliver it. So my question to you is, can the education community come together with this? Can we form some new partnerships to make it happen? How can you be involved? Let's get a conversation going here today and get started. Thanks so much for listening.
2021 is an appropriate beginning of a relearning process. I'm very grateful that you have invited us to participate in this learning festival. 2021 has started with a big drama, a second surge of the coronavirus, much more aggressive, attacking young people and ending the lives of professionals and other well and full-bodied human beings. We also have witnessed something we thought we'll never see. The mighty USA having its capital stormed at the instigation of its own president. This is a reminder to all of us that we have yet to learn the lessons of the planetary emergencies that came to the fore with the first outbreak of coronavirus in 2020. We are called in 2021 to go back to the wisdom of our ancients, who understood as they observed Mother Nature and the way she organized the universe, that life is an interdependent, interconnected web, and each one of us is called to make the best contribution we can make to make the whole better than the sum of its parts. In my language, this is called Ubuntu, because my ancient ancestors understood that I cannot be unless humanity is. So the I am because you are, it's not just a slogan. It's a live philosophical approach that we need to embrace and use as a base for lifelong learning. Education is of no value if it's only about certification. Education is about sharpening, raising, and connecting our consciousness so that we can be able to deal with the complexities of life, not by finding solutions, but by understanding how to ask tough questions of ourselves and of our environment. I have no doubt that we have in us the capacity to rise above the planetary emergencies that we face today, to reach for the dream of being the human race that was created with a level of consciousness that enables humanity to learn from its mistakes, to learn from its successes, but more importantly, to respect the importance of other human beings, their rights, and their well-being. We cannot but aspire to an emergence of humanity out of this current planetary crisis into working together to create a planet that is a learning planet, that is a planet governed by the promotion of well-being. We have the capacity to do this. The question is, do we have the will? That's the challenge. I thank you.
Hello to everyone joining all around the world. My name is Sarah Dalglish, and I'm pleased to join you today to talk about child health based on the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission and its report, A Future for the World's Children. Now, when I started working as a scientist on child health, the key focus was something called U5MR, under 5 child mortality. And that's the number of children under age 5 that die each year. This is still really important because each year more than 5 million children die, mostly from easily preventable and treatable causes. But at the same time, our understanding of child health has also evolved over these years to include things like the health of older children and adolescents, to include early childhood development, that is, whether children receive the care they need to thrive, not just to survive, to include things like chronic diseases, since unhealthy habits are often set in childhood and adolescence, as well as things like injuries, air pollution, sexual and reproductive health. And then there's climate change. The climate crisis is an emergency, especially for children, because they're more vulnerable to its effects. And they also have no choice but to inherit the earth that we leave them. As we know, children and youth are speaking out strongly about climate change around the world. And so there's no point in talking about children's health and well-being unless we put it in the context of climate change. So with these issues in mind, the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission brought together more than 40 top experts on child health and well-being from all around the globe. Our aim was to bring child health into the 21st century and to create the transformational change that's needed to ensure that children are protected both now and in the future. So our report focused on 3 key challenges for children's health. The first challenge is, of course, climate change. Children are especially vulnerable. Just to give one example, children exposed to air pollution, even in utero, are more likely to develop respiratory problems, diabetes, cardiovascular problems, and learning difficulties later in life. So that's already today. The future could be much, much worse. And that's why it's so important to take leadership from the children and youths who have been leading in climate action, because they're the most affected. For us, children's health is actually at the center of what we mean by sustainability and of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs. The second challenge for children's health has to do with commercial marketing. This is an under-recognized threat that our report lays out in some detail. Children are targeted by commercial entities that make billions in profit by selling products and services that harm their health and well-being. So that's things like tobacco, alcohol, sugar-sweetened beverages, ultra-processed foods, but also gambling services that can harm mental health and relationships. Children are vastly exposed to such marketing. For example, one multi-country study showed that 2/3 of 5 and 6-year-olds could recognize at least one cigarette brand. So we're pushing for both national and transnational regulation to rein in these abuses. The third and final challenge is the broadest. It has to do with governments that don't work across sectors to protect and nurture children's health. If you want to protect children, the health and education sectors are critical, but they're not all. You also need to bring in housing, transportation, agriculture, trade, really all sectors who will work together to ensure children are healthy and protected in all aspects of their lives. So we want to bring stakeholders in countries together to institutionalize action for children across all sectors. Since our report came out, the world has been hit with COVID-19. Fortunately, children are less affected by the virus itself. However, according to UNESCO data, school closures have affected over 1.5 billion students worldwide, worsening inequalities between rich and poor, between boys and girls, and making life worse for already oppressed groups. Children at home during lockdowns are more exposed to domestic violence. Girls out of school may be more likely to get pregnant, and whole families and communities are suffering from the economic crisis. Children's health can also be directly impacted by disruptions to vaccination campaigns and regularly scheduled healthcare. Children are also less able to play together and socialize, which is critical for their development. So COVID-19 has made our agenda for children even more important. Since our report came out, we've been working to turn our recommendations into reality. We'll soon announce a new secretariat with a unique model based on science, advocacy, and coalition building. Because the response to our report showed us that lots and lots of people want to join and support a movement for children. Children themselves have the right priorities. In our report, they talk to us about family togetherness, clean environments, education and culture, and the right to play. That's why it's so exciting to have children's and youth groups with us today who can help lead us into the future that they deserve. So if you want to learn more, check out the report of the WHO UNICEF Lancet Commission and stay tuned for more news soon. Thank you so much for your attention.
Hello, I'm Valerie Delmot. I'm a climate scientist in France and a co-chair of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change for the working group on the physical science basis of climate change. And I'm glad to be with you to celebrate the International Day of Education. The first question is, what are the main challenges that I and my organization address? I would say the two main challenges are to assess and to communicate clearly the state of knowledge related to climate change, climate-related risks, and solutions regarding risk management, adaptation, and action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions while ensuring sustainable development. The first challenge is linked to the amazing development of knowledge through a growing number of peer-reviewed publications on the topic of climate change, which is placing a growing burden on the authors of our reports who need to develop new methodologies to look at the multiple lines of evidence and assess what is robust, what is emergent, why there are scientific controversies, and where are today's knowledge limits and gaps. The second challenge is related to the communication. When you have a rigorous, robust, objective and exhaustive assessment, it's not enough if the assessment is not used. So we need to empower scientists and authors of the report to better communicate their findings to different audiences. And we also need more partnerships with specialists of education so that they can build from our reports to communicate the findings and the state of scientific knowledge more broadly and to the younger generations. What are the main priorities and programs of the Ipcc? We are now in the 6th assessment cycle of the Ipcc, and we have released 3 special reports in 2018 and 2019. The first one is on global warming of 1.5 degrees Celsius, and this report has clearly shown how much every fraction of additional global warming matters in terms of additional risks, how much every year matters in terms of climate action, and how much every choice matters to build sustainability while acting on climate change. And these 2 dimensions can go hand in hand if they are well designed and well implemented. The second report is related to climate change and land. It shows the growing pressure linked to climate change, which adds to other pressure due to human behavior and choices on land affecting terrestrial ecosystems. It shows how much the land sector is part of the solutions, with multiple aspects where it's possible to act, and with, for the first time, an approach through the food system lens. And it is important because it shows how climate change affects our landscapes, how it affects our farms where food is produced, and our plates, what we eat. It also shows where we can act at the scale of collective choices and at the scale of individual choices. And the last report was on the ocean and cryosphere, everything with snow and ice in a changing climate. And this report shows how much the ocean and the cryosphere have taken up the heat of climate change, how much we depend on ecosystems, which will continue to change on the long term. And it highlights the importance of anticipating, using climate information to develop adaptation strategies. We celebrate today the International Day of Education, and these reports highlight how much education can play a pivotal role in how climate change is perceived, experienced. It also shows the key enabling conditions linked to education and climate literacy to enable climate action. And I would like to flag the need for more contribution of the broad education community to the work of Ipcc, both in terms of knowledge production to support our assessments and in terms of use of Ipcc reports for education needs. The next question is to share with you one achievement that I'm proud of and successes. I would say that, of course, the release of 3 special reports in 2 years is an achievement, and I'm particularly proud of the adaptation of the 1.5 report for different audiences by other organizations, for urban decision makers, or for education by the Office for Climate Education. This gives a new dimension to how our climate change assessment reports can be adapted and used by other audiences that are closer to local decision making and closer to the needs of teachers, especially through the development of material for use in the classroom. And I hope that this year, in 2021, I will be proud of the achievement of our main working group report. We're working now with 230 authors from 60 different countries in the pandemic context to assess the state of knowledge related to climate change at the global scale, but also at the regional scale, because regional information is key for taking action and also key for awareness of what is climate change where we live. And another question is one of the critical obstacles that I'm facing. The assessment of the state of knowledge really relies on collective intelligence. And to make use of this collective intelligence, we need to implement inclusive and participatory work approaches. We've actually worked with consultants to seek their guidance for our meetings before the pandemic and for working online during the pandemic. We have learned to understand our cultural differences. We have developed a basis to trust each other, to define explicitly how to work together. For instance, how to express agreement or disagreement across different cultures, genders, experience or seniority levels. And this was critical to be able to operate and work together as a team. Repeated surveys have also been critical so that we can measure the success or the limits of what was previously implemented and be in a constant adaptation or flexibility stage. Working online is associated with specific challenges. For instance, with different internet access, with different time zones. So we've also adapted our practices so that we can make the best use of the availability of the authors of our report working online. And I will be particularly proud when we release this report, which has the same quality as usual, but has been developed with very different practices. If I am asked to give my favorite example of effective collaboration in addressing a complex issue, I would like to flag the review process that is at the heart of the Ipcc reports. At the beginning, you do a brainstorming, you define the scoping of a report and a broad structure. And then the authors of that report populate this broad structure. They make a first draft assessing the literature. And these drafts go through open review from the international research community and experts nominated by governments. And it's amazing to see how much this review process brings in different ways of looking at the same question, knowledge of multiple lines of evidence in different regions of the world, and how this review process helps the maturation of the assessment and gives to this assessment its quality. This can be implemented in the classroom for any practical work. You can learn from each other, from the critical minds and the knowledge from each other by implementing a review process. And it's also at the heart of the methodology of knowledge production in science. It's really important to build this scientific methodology, learn how to implement that, and it's key for effective collaboration. And moving forward, what do I think would be a key thing to develop more effective collective problem solving? I really think that inclusivity is the key, making it possible that everyone feels comfortable, that everyone understands that each person can contribute, but with different ways of collaborating. Some people are more comfortable in spoken interactions, others are more comfortable in written interactions. And there are now opportunities to make the best use of each one's specificities so that inclusive participatory practices can be implemented. And they are key to make use of all forms of intelligence, for instance, academic knowledge, but also local knowledge or indigenous knowledge, which will be key to address complex issues related to climate change. Thank you very much.
Learning to share, learning to help, learning to understand, learning to solve, learning to collaborate.
Hi, my name is Jeff Hoffman, and I am chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. The challenge our organization was created to address is the challenge of turning an idea into a business, of creating a job for yourself in parts of the world, in cities where you can't get a job. You make a job. You create jobs for the people around you. For people that want to become entrepreneurs, to gain economic independence and freedom, we created the Global Entrepreneurship Network with that mission. Let's help anybody, anywhere that wants to turn an idea into a business and grow that business be able to do so. So that is the challenge that we address here at the Global Entrepreneurship Network. And our priority is building ecosystems of collaborators around entrepreneurs in cities all over the world so that entrepreneurs have the collaborative partners that they need. That includes governments, universities, investors, employees, etc., to be able to build businesses and create economic growth. One of the achievements we're most proud of, I believe, would probably be our creation of Global Entrepreneurship Week. The third week of November every year, we created an awareness week of entrepreneurship, and we've asked people around the world to celebrate entrepreneurs and entrepreneurship by hosting activities wherever they live during this 1 week in November every year. And to give you an idea of what it's grown and why I'm particularly proud of our team for that achievement, this past year, I believe there were about 40,000 entrepreneurship events celebrating the economic freedom created by entrepreneurs in 180 countries that drew over 10 million attendees. So that's the achievement I'm most proud of, was our ability to create the awareness and support for entrepreneurs everywhere, to give people a chance to help themselves. In terms of obstacles, one of the biggest obstacles that we faced would probably be that of cultural differences. We work, as I mentioned, in 180 different countries, the Global Entrepreneurship Network, or GEN, as we call it. And working in 180 different countries, even though we are addressing the same problem, requires understanding that people don't live in the same environment, that culturally they process information, they distribute in education, they work within an governmental regulation or ecosystem or infrastructure, and language-wise, all these things are different in all of these countries, and we have to recognize that to implement a program that is truly global and globally collaborative, we have to understand how cultures affect the way the education we perceive, the way the education that we deliver is perceived. And we have to understand how we need to create a collaborative environment that is respectful for every culture, that is addressable in multiple different languages. So global collaboration on a truly global scale, like we do, is probably one of our biggest challenges. We hold an event, an example of one of our big collaborations would be that every year we hold an event called the Global Entrepreneurship Congress, or GEC. And this is, prior to the COVID pandemic, a physical event where I believe last time we held the event pre-COVID, 2019, I think we had entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial ecosystem builders come to collaborate with us into one country. We all flew to one country, and I think they came from something like 172 other countries to join. So at this Congress, we hold collaborative think tank sessions so that we can all sit together and discuss the best practices for collaboration in order to deliver the ecosystem support that entrepreneurs worldwide need to be able to create new businesses, launch ideas, again, create economic freedom, and provide for the people where they live. We are teaching people how to help themselves, but they need the collaboration of others to be able to do that. And some tips maybe I'd like to leave you with about collaboration is collaborative problem solving, is to focus heavily on best practices. And what I mean by that is, instead of telling people what you believe works, and I see that so frequently, people say, here's the way to solve this problem. I'm telling you how to solve it because I've solved it before and I know. Instead of doing that, what we've discovered works was to go on a listening tour way before you go on a speaking tour. We spend much time, I do this pretty much every day of my life as chairman of the Global Entrepreneurship Network. I'm on WhatsApp, Zoom, email, phone, or in other better times, physically visiting with people in our collaborative 180 country network on a regular basis. And I'm not telling them, I'm asking them. I'm saying to them, what collaborative practices have been most effective for you as problem solvers where you live? And what can we learn? What lessons can we draw out from your best practices and broaden and generalize them so we can share best practices with people in our collaborative network all over the world? So I think that's the piece of advice I want to leave you with, is listen way more than you speak and collect a book of best practices by, asking people what worked where they are. We have been able to share our best practices on a global basis and help a lot of people accelerate their economic growth in a way that we could not have done if we only gave them one path to success. Thank you very much, and I hope you all go out and collaborate, and feel free to visit us anytime at genglobal.co. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stavros Yanuka, and I'm the Chief Executive of WISE, the World Innovation Summit for Education, an initiative of the Qatar Foundation. WISE was established over 10 years ago by Qatar Foundation under the leadership of Her Highness Sheikh Hamza bin Nasser to identify, learn from, and enable innovation in education in order to achieve the Sustainable Development Goal of quality education for all. We do this because we know that a more educated world is a happier, healthier, more peaceful, and more prosperous world. The main challenges we're trying to address include how best to support sustainable and innovation within education, how to build the capacity of our key stakeholders, which of course include school leaders, as well as learners of all ages, so that they're able to actively shape the future of education. And finally, how do we leverage collective intelligence towards building a global ecosystem that is capable of solving some of the education sector's most pressing issues, chief amongst which is in fact, how do we scale innovation effectively? Some of our main priorities include our newly launched Innovation Hub, which serves as an engine for developing, testing, and scaling innovations within the learning environment. And we want innovations that seek to put personalized learning and well-being at the heart of the education enterprise. Now, with the help of the Innovation Hub, our network of schools will be able to share best practices and research in order to collaboratively evolve and scale their innovations. We have a year-long fellowship program for emerging leaders that aims to cultivate the next generation of systems leaders in education. Now, through this community, we hope to encourage, again, knowledge sharing and capacity building, and to empower young talent within the education sector to accelerate positive transformation for their organizations and the communities in which they operate, and indeed the whole world. Recently, just last year, we launched a learning ecosystems program that challenges local communities to rethink what education in its broadest sense means, and encourages them to utilize all available assets and resources to create learning opportunities for all citizens, both inside and outside the classroom. At the heart of this program are young people, and WISE aims to equip them with the skills necessary to help them implement the change they hope to see in education. The program is in fact based on the idea that learners are and should be co-creators of their own learning and the environment in which that learning takes place. They are active stakeholders invested in the future of their learning and that of their communities. Of course, WISE is also interested in the role that technology can play in transforming education, and that's why we have the WISE Accelerator program, which has been running for 6 years and has supported the development of edtech startups from around the world. We want to see how technology can transform classrooms worldwide. Now this year, we've also extended that program to include an education technology testbed, a project that aims to observe how pedagogy and learning design can be enriched through technology, what works, what doesn't, and why. And finally, it would be remiss of me not to mention our two most established and prestigious programs, which are, of course, the WISE Awards and the WISE Prize for Education. These were some of the first programs launched by WISE, and they seek to identify and celebrate innovation in education and the people behind that innovation in education. What am I most proud of that I would like to celebrate on the International Day of Education? That's a difficult choice to make, but I think I would need to highlight amongst a number of achievements the fact that this year WISE, the year that's passed, 2020, the year of the pandemic, WISE launched a 3-part online forum series titled Education Disrupted, Education Reimagined. And as a result of that, in collaboration with Salzburg Global Seminar and others, we put together an ebook that featured stories, testimonials, and learnings from key stakeholders across 98 countries on how they responded to the COVID-19 crisis and the ways they used the experience of this pandemic to reimagine and transform education in their communities. That, I believe, is a timely contribution that WISE has made to an active and ongoing crisis that the education sector is confronting. I've already mentioned the WISE Edtech Testbed. WISE has always been interested in the role that technology can play to support innovation in the classroom. Our Edtech Accelerator program has been able to support the knowledge and skills building of startup founders and their team. But this year, we're enriching this program by launching the Edtech Testbed, a project that not only aims to build a sustainable bridge between edtech ventures and local schools, but also create an ongoing research initiative that's capable of providing teachers and school leaders with a deeper understanding of edtech and its potential for classroom learning. And finally, I do want to mention that amidst the disruption of the COVID-19 pandemic, the education sector faced significant challenges that required rapid adjustment. WISE itself was no exception. Despite the unprecedented circumstances, the team at WISE were not afraid to explore new opportunities for collaboration within our global network. And in many ways, we sought to leverage the uncertainty and use it as an opportunity to reimagine the education status quo. Whether it was through the publication of the ebook that I've just mentioned, our 3-part online forum, or the launch of our education testbed, we aim to create new pathways to innovation, both for ourselves and our global partners. I think one of the ongoing obstacles that we as WISE are facing is how do we continue to drive sustainable innovation as we navigate the pandemic. as COVID, I think, has put us at a tipping point in education, where there is a real opportunity to see transformation occur within the global system, but at the same time, we need to really work hard to collectively build a shared vision of what learning means in the 21st century. Oftentimes, efforts like these tend to very quickly fragment with each country, each region going its own way. And the reason why it exists is really to help create bridges and ensure that as a globe and as a global community, we're moving towards a shared and sustainable system that's capable of powering human and economic development for the 21st century.
Hello, I'm Valerie Hannon, and I've been asked to say a bit about the work of the Global Education Leaders Partnership, or GELP, which is its acronym, a rather ugly one, and the way it's known by its participants. So I'm doing that on behalf of my co-founders and the team members, all of whom are dedicated to three specific objectives, I think. We're about the business of transforming education, and we emphasize that because we are really interested in the transformation and not just the improvement of existing systems. Secondly, we work fundamentally with system leaders. Of course, we're interested, and institutions are immensely important, but our target population and participants are people who are leaders in their own systems. And thirdly, we're increasingly interested in and emphasizing ecosystems. That is to say, looking beyond the boundaries of professional participants in education to involve all the assets of communities. So why are we catalysts? Well, we believe that our work with system leaders has shown that when they go back to work in their jurisdictions, the experience of working with other GELP members intensively over a period of time, thinking about the dimensions of transformation, has a catalytic effect upon them. And we can show that in some of the jurisdictions that they go back to return to work in, really interesting and important shifts have been made towards a better fitting system for the 21st century. We've been working now for over 10 years. We've had convenings in every continent, from Australia to Finland, from Rio to Seoul. Until 2020, all our convenings were intensively residential. In 2020, of course, that wasn't possible, and we had our first virtual convening focused on Washington. And we will return as a hybrid from 2021, starting in the UK. Our method is to have as a focus the home or hosting jurisdiction. And leaders are brought together to look at the leading innovations there and the challenges and problems that that jurisdiction is facing. The aim is to learn from what is going on there, but also to contribute ideas for solutions. So that effort is scaffolded by the GELP team having scanned worldwide developments, synthesized them, and brought into the room guest participating speakers who are at the forefront of those developments. We have had, over the years, many worldwide partners, foundations, universities, the OECD. It really wouldn't be possible to do what we do without a wide network of partners. The work is highly participative, as you can imagine. GELP members need to bring their full selves and contribute everything from their professional backgrounds into the mix. So like many organisations facing a period of uncertainty, we are looking now to think about what kinds of modalities we might use in 2021 going forward. And that's why we're absolutely delighted to be announcing during this festival that we formed a partnership with Learning Planet as we develop and evolve. Our website, by the way, is under reconstruction, so please don't judge us by that. But a new website will be up and ready very shortly, and we'd really like you to take a look. Going back to this point about being catalytic, so many of the leaders who've been working with us have told us that GELP was the most powerful learning experience they'd ever experienced. So we plan to move forward with Learning Planet with real excitement, and we hope you will join us. Thanks for listening.
Hello, my name is Mark Ritchie, and I serve as president of Global Minnesota. We're a 70-year-old organization that started out as a welcoming committee to students coming from around the world to our universities and colleges. We've grown over the years, and now we operate as a full World Affairs Council. In that period of time, of course, the world has gone through incredible changes, and so has our community. We've welcomed diaspora from Africa, from Latin America, from Asia, who've joined those who've come to this part of the continent from Europe and other parts of the world. We've also changed and grown our mission. Our goal now, advancing international understanding and engagement. We do this through connecting Minnesotans to the world and the world to Minnesota. One of the things that we found is that the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals have been a very effective way for us to connect to other people and their vision, their mission, their passion. In Minnesota, but around the United States, there are organizations like Global Minnesota who share this passion, but also many of the community groups, our companies, university, academic centers. And so that Sustainable Development Goal number 17, partnerships, is really one of the guides and one of the things that directs how we organize our work and what we choose to do and how we do it. This last year, we've been partnering with other organizations around the planet on things like World Food Day, this day, International Day of Education, and in the future, World Health Day and others. We find that it is the time with the current limits of the pandemic when virtual connecting through digital means has become a very effective tool for both reaching broader, more diverse audiences, but also sharing in a much more advanced way. In Minnesota, we have interest. How have other countries been so successful in protecting themselves and their people from this pandemic, from COVID-19? What can we learn from other countries about how they've adapted educational programs or things like truth and reconciliation? We have issues, particularly around racial justice and other social concerns. So finding new ways to learn from each other globally, to share and to learn about cultures, but also where we are, our state happens to have the highest % of refugees that have been welcomed here. It's something our state is very proud of. Wherever you go on the planet, there are people coming and going from their own community, left and come back, or maybe from clear across the world. People fall in love, people pursue education, a job, a business opportunity, or come and create a new enterprise. And so we have this opportunity to learn and to connect. And that's one of the special things about this whole Learning Planet and the initiative to bring us together on this special day. Minnesota is looking ahead. It's a very special decade in some ways. We know that in 2030, we want to reach those Sustainable Development Goals. We have objectives around climate and reducing greenhouse gas emission, but also we are aware that there are global events like the Dubai Expo coming up next winter, Osaka holding a World Expo in 2025. The United States will celebrate a 250th anniversary, and Minnesota is bidding to host a World Expo on the Sustainable Development Goals, specifically number 3, health, good health and well-being for all at all ages, in the summer of 2027. So each of these opportunities for us to connect and learn from each other also gives us the opportunity to create long-term relationships, to build our thinking, our feelings, our emotional connections, and making us able to think about all of the gifts that we've inherited from those who've come before us. How do we take good care of them? How do we take really special care and keep those alive and well and make them better? But also, how do we invest our time, our talents, our finance, our money into making sure that we're leaving the planet a better place and creating new opportunities for those generations, really for times we shall never see. So this is a great day for celebrating together and learning, but you know, it's the next day, it's the next step, it's the next chapter in moving ahead. And there's a lot of excitement in the US about new things happening. There's also a clear picture of the difficulties we still face with the pandemic and the economic impacts and the underlying disparities and injustices. So we have a lot of work to do, but today is a day for connecting, for acknowledging, and for learning from each other. And we're really grateful for this opportunity. Again, my name is Mark Ritchie. I'm honored to be serving as president of Global Minnesota, based in the state of Minnesota in the United States. Thank you again.
Colleagues, Anthony McKay, CEO and President of the National Center on Education and the Economy, based in Washington, DC, and also co-chair of a wonderful new initiative in Australia called Learning Creates Australia. Thank you for the opportunity of making a contribution to what is going to be a wonderful Learning Planet Festival, and the opportunity to make a contribution as one of a number of catalysts over what is promising to be an opportunity for us to share our work across multiple geographies. And in the case of Learning Creates Australia, we have fantastic links with the Global Education Leaders Partnership, with WISE, with OECD, with a whole range of other colleagues that are participating in this festival. Let me give you just the outline of this initiative, and you'll recognize so many parts and aspects of this in relation to your own work. I'm being helped with this presentation, this short presentation with a series of slides, so I'll call for the first. So colleagues, you'll see that Learning Creates is an alliance of people and organizations of the very kind that all of us have been associated with over many years. And in this case, of course, committed to lifting the nation through a new era of learning. Next, please. It is bringing together stakeholders from across the entire Australian community, and our purpose is to create innovative, practical solutions that will address some of the most systematic challenges, the systemic educational challenges that we currently face. Next, please. We set ourselves a central challenge question. How might we develop a new and trusted way to recognize learning that enables every young person to thrive in learning, work, and the community? Now, many, of course, are working on precisely this territory at the moment, the recognition of learning in ways that recognize that the old metrics of success are too narrow. And what we want are new measures of success that enable all young people to, as we say, thrive in learning, work, and the community. Next, please. We are using a social lab methodology. We're going through 3 cycles. At the moment, we've just completed cycle 1, which has been exploring the recognition of learning through a variety of equity lens. We're going then to a second cycle where we test and demonstrate some promising prototypes. And then, of course, ultimately, we need to be able to establish a new valued system of recognition that's going to ensure that we have the trust of all of the key players in the learning game. Next, please. This gives you just a snapshot of the fact that we are working particularly with stakeholders, young people, parents, communities, employers, policymakers, all of those people that make up the broader community of those who are concerned about learning. And you'll see that we are thinking about learning in a setting, not just schools, but out of school, juvenile justice, online, homeschooling, learning in a place. We are thinking very much of not just metropolitan, obviously, but rural and remote, urban, learner as a person with different diversities, neurodiversity, issues around disability, learners as people who come from low socioeconomic status, including migrants and refugees, learners who are different in a whole variety of ways, LGBTQI plus communities. And of course, in the case of Australia, an absolute commitment to ensuring that we recognise powerful learning amongst those who are First Nations people. All of this is being done in a way that tries to address the experiences of young people at this point who are experiencing significant disadvantage within the current system. Next, please. A paper has just been published that will be available to you. We have shared it with Learning Planet colleagues, and we are attempting here to lay out the territory of what a new recognition system would look like. A system that recognises learning success for all young people, but of course, different sets of measures than the ones that we tend to have at the moment. And again, I've indicated that this is shared work across multiple geographies, but we are delighted that in Australia at the moment, we're able to build on previous work, and we hope to address in new ways breakthroughs that will help not only young people in Australia, but across geographies. Obviously, we will need a system that is able to generate trust. It can be used in ways that can really support particularly young people who are in their senior secondary years of education as they move to multiple pathways in a post-secondary environment. Next, please. I won't spend time on this other than to say that we recognise that there are a range of components of a new recognition system that we must address. Obviously, our very ambitions for learning, ways in which we assess learning, the standards that we apply, the way in which we think about the metrics of learning, the recognition of that through credentials, all of this will require new agreements. So you can see that as we think about this work, we're thinking about the complexity of all of the components that will need to be aligned, coherent, in order to generate the kind of utility and trust of which I've spoken. The next, please. So you can see that we are thinking about learning and the future of learning that will need to be adaptive to the very complexity and uncertainty, a new world of work, a new world of learning for all people. Obviously, our focus on senior secondary, but we know that this applies to young people, old people, those who are moving various transition points in their lives and thinking about the nature of learning in so many different places. So colleagues, I hope that you get some of the challenge, some of the excitement, some of the promise that we feel that we have through Learning Creates Australia. We're looking forward to sharing that with you as we gather together and convene around the Learning Planet Festival. Thank you very much.
During 2014, I was in school. They said that a deadly epidemic has just come to a county called Ebola. At first, I was thinking that our school closed down, like how we're gonna do about our education. I was having the feeling like, oh, we're going backward.
The government said the kids cannot just be at home without doing anything. So they called some of us. They picked on really the creme de la creme teachers who really knew their subject area, and we had a drawing out of syllabus, core contents, and eventually we started teaching.
You're listening to Education Radio, the country's finest.
It was a very good idea for that radio station to start up with that initiative because I learned a lot from it.
We had professional teachers who had to teach us during that session.
Like the way they passed on the information.
I believe it was a platform for us to have effective learning.
They made it a point of duty for it to be precise, concise, and easy for us to take down.
For the most part, we were able to have the best results that year in a very long time. So that was an indication that with the right teachers, with the proper setting, learning could take place and the quality would obviously improve.
Going forward, there are several components to this, the learning and teaching materials, the quality, the tuition. We want to use technology to exponentially increase the quality of education.
Hello, I'm Alice Albright, the CEO of the Global Partnership for Education, or GPE. For the past 2 decades, GPE has been mobilizing partners and funds so that every girl and boy in the world can go to school and learn, and have the hope and opportunity that a quality education offers. So, we are truly supporters of the vision for a learning planet. GPE works in the countries with the greatest needs and with a focus on reaching the most marginalized children. As you've just seen, when Ebola hit in Sierra Leone, GPE supported the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology to deliver learning over the radio. With GPE's support, more than 80,000 portable radios were distributed to make sure that children could continue to learn despite school closures. The best teachers in the country were recruited to run the program. And for many students, it was the first time that they were learning from highly qualified teachers. When schools reopened, GPE helped set up the Teacher Service Commission, or TSC, to help make sure that every child can have a great teacher. And when the coronavirus pandemic emerged last year, Sierra Leone was able to reboot their distance learning program to make sure that children did not miss out on school. In Sierra Leone and around the world, our work is making a difference in the lives of millions of children. But the economic impacts of the coronavirus crisis are squeezing education budgets and forcing families to make hard choices, such as whether to send their children back to school or to work. That's why GPE is calling on world leaders to raise their hands and pledge funding and support for education. We're asking donors to pledge at least $5 billion to help GPE transform education in up to 90 countries and territories, which are home to more than 1 billion children. Please join us. Go to raiseyourhand.net and raise your hand for education and for a better future for all of us. Thank you.
When she raised her hand, it was to reach the highest point. When she raised her hand, it was to touch the stars. To find a cure. To give us a reason to dream. When he raised his hand, it was to stand up for his rights, to start over, to learn against all odds. When she raises her hand, it's to answer yes, to seize her future. Every change starts with a powerful act. Raise your hand. Fund education.